The question of what happens to the soul after death has concerned mankind throughout history. Many peoples have their own ideas about the afterlife, but discussions about it continue. There are new versions of what happens to a person when he dies and where his soul goes. According to most ideas about the afterlife, the soul goes its way after death and it has its own stages of separation from the earthly world and rebirth. Where is the soul of the deceased up to 40 days? In Slavic culture, it is believed that when the soul leaves the body after death, it is 40 days where it lived in the earthly incarnation. The deceased is attracted to places and people with whom he was associated during his lifetime. The spiritual substance, having left the physical body, for 40 days, says goodbye to relatives and home. When the 40th day comes, the Slavs have a tradition of seeing the soul off to the other world. There are other versions. Recently, foreign scientists have found out that the human soul after death is sent to the universal data storage. Back in 1996, scientists conducted a series of experiments, the purpose of which was to find out where the human soul is located and what happens to it after the death of the body. As it turned out, the location of the soul in the human body are microtubules in the brain. Researchers believe that it is in this place contains data about the past lives of an individual and the number of his reincarnations. It was found that at the moment when clinical death occurs, the human brain loses its activity, but the soul together with its database continues to exist, storing important information. The first minutes after death. After a person dies, he does not immediately enter the afterlife. Some souls, having lost their physical shell, at first do not realize what is happening. With a special vision, the spiritual entity sees his immobile body and only then realizes that life in the material world is over. After the emotional shock, having come to terms with its fate, the spiritual substance begins to explore a new space. The third day after death. Many peoples have a tradition of burying the deceased 3 days after death has occurred. There is an opinion that only at the end of the 3-day period there is a separation of the soul from the body, all vital energies are completely cut off. After the 3-day period, the spiritual component of a person, accompanied by an angel, goes to the other world, where its fate will be determined. The 9th day after death. The 9th day after death is also considered significant. There are several versions of what the soul does after the death of the physical body on the 9th day. According to the religious figures of the Old Testament cult, the spiritual substance after the expiration of the 9-day period after usp, i.e. death, undergoes a washing or torment. Some sources adhere to the theory that on the 9th day the body of the deceased leaves the flesh, subconsciousness. This action takes place after the spirit, superconsciousness, and soul, consciousness, have left the deceased. What survivors of clinical death tell people? About 60% of those resuscitated testify to encountering an amazing source that radiates incredible light and perfect bliss. To some this cosmic personality appears as the Creator, to others as Jesus Christ, to others as an angel. What distinguishes this extraordinarily bright creature of pure light is that in his presence the human soul feels comprehensive love and absolute understanding. Some, returning from the other world, tell of the sensation of a precipitous fall, after which they found themselves in a place filled with fear. Sounds. There are testimonies that say that when a person dies, he can hear unpleasant humming, buzzing, loud ringing, noise as if from the wind, crackling and other sounds. The sounds are sometimes accompanied by movement at great speed through a tunnel, after which the soul enters another space. Sometimes dying people hear voices of dead relatives or incomprehensible speech of angels. Light. The very light at the end of the tunnel is seen by most people who have returned after clinical death. According to the testimonies of resuscitated patients, a huge stream of pure luminescence is always accompanied by peace of mind. This divine light is perceived by a kind of spiritual vision, but upon returning to the physical body, many clearly imagine and describe the unearthly glow seen. Where does the soul go after death? The question of where exactly is the soul, which does not stop living after death, but goes to another state, cannot get an exact answer in earthly categories. This place cannot be pointed at with a finger, because the incorporeal world is beyond the boundary of the material world perceived by us. It is easier to answer the question, to whom will our soul go? And here, according to the teachings of the Church, we can trust that after our earthly death our soul will go to the Lord, His saints and, of course, to our departed relatives and friends whom we loved in life. Where is the soul located after death? After a person's death, the Lord decides where his soul will be before the Last Judgment, in paradise or in hell. As the Church teaches, the Lord's decision is only and only His response to the state and disposition of the soul itself, and what it chose more often in life, light or darkness, sin or virtue. Heaven and hell are not places, but rather the state of post-mortem existence of the human soul, which is characterized either by being with God or in opposition to Him. At the same time, Christians believe that before the Last Judgment all the dead will be resurrected by the Lord and reunited with their bodies. The taxation of the soul after death. The journey of the soul to the throne of God is accompanied by the taxing or testing of the soul. According to the tradition of the Church, the essence of the ordeal is that evil spirits convict the soul of certain transgressions. The very word tax collectors refers to the word mitnya. This was the name of the place for collecting fines and taxes. A kind of payment on this spiritual temazni are the virtues of the deceased, as well as church and home prayers, which are made for him by his neighbors. Of course, it is impossible to understand the taxation in a direct sense, as a kind of tribute offered to God for sins. It is rather a full and clear realization of all that burdened the soul of man in life and that he could not fully feel. In addition to this, there are words in the Eucharist that give us hope that we can escape these trials. He who hears my word and believes in him who sent me shall not come into judgment. The path of the soul after death. Certainly, the description of the path that the soul takes after death, moving from the place of its earthly dwelling to the Lord's throne and then to heaven or hell, should not be understood literally as a certain cartographically verified route. The afterlife is incomprehensible to our earthly minds. In the Church's teaching about the path of the soul after death, symbolically manifests a hard-to-understand spiritual truth, which we will fully know and see after the end of our earthly life. Thank you for learning about yourself and the universe with me. Trust yourself, listen to your heart and go forward with confidence and peace of mind. Give me a like and share this video with your friends if it was helpful to you. See you again on my channel where we will continue to explore the mysteries of spiritual development and growth. Goodbye and may light and wisdom always accompany you on your path.